Correct watering to me is the most important step when it comes to caring for a houseplant. I have a lot of houseplants here, and I have learned that the fastest way to kill a houseplant is incorrect watering. And I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of lessons over the years. So for this episode in my Houseplant Care 101 series, I'm going to be sharing some things to keep in mind when watering, some different techniques you can use, some different factors to keep in mind that can kind of affect the success of your type of watering that you're doing with your plant that will set you up for, like I said, success when it comes to watering your plants. The information I'm sharing is relevant to most tropical houseplants that we have in our home, but I thought, what is a more perfect plant to use as an example when talking about watering and doing different demonstrations of what to do than the Pothos or Epipremnum. Now, most of us have Pothos in our homes, so I thought, okay, perfect plant. Many of us have more than one Pothos variety in our home, or many different Pothos that we've done through propagation. The information that's relevant to Pothos is relevant to a lot of other tropical houseplants that we have in our home.
But first, a huge thank you to rePotme.com for partnering with me for this episode and sponsoring my Houseplant Care 101 series. rePotme.com is dedicated to providing quality plant care products. They specialize in products for houseplants, orchids, succulents, African violets, and more. I love their incredible potting soils and mediums found in their new houseplant section because they're all such terrific quality. Also in this houseplant section, they have soil specifically for certain plants like monsteras, snake plants, philodendrons, pothos, peace lilies, and more. Their pots and planters are also a favorite of mine for my plants. They have beautiful decorative planters, and they also have their original rePotme designed pots like the slotted orchid pots and oxygen core duo pots, and they really help create the perfect environment for growing. They're also well known for their gold standard plant fertilizers, pest prevention options, grow lights, care tips, and more. I've included their website in my description below so you can take a look at their quality plant care products.
As with the rest of my Houseplant Care 101 series, none of this stuff is rocket science. It's just a lot of common sense things to keep in mind when you're watering. So first common sense question we would ask ourselves, is it the right time to water my plant? How can I tell when my plant is thirsty and ready to be watered? So first off, I would discourage against having a strict watering schedule. And what I mean by that is definitely watering your plant every X number of days. So it's every 3 days you water your plants, or every week you water your plants, without checking that your plants need it first. I mean, so many factors go into your plant drying out, whether it's the winter time and the soil retains moisture more and your plant isn't growing so it doesn't need as much moisture, or if it's the growing season it needs to be watered more often. I would say use that set watering schedule time to go around and check that your plants even need watering, and then water the ones that do need it. I've let my pothos get really thirsty for this video, as you can see, and the leaves are looking dehydrated. They're kind of wilting a little bit or droopy. So that's an indicator to me, okay, this plant is thirsty. Now ignore, as you can see, I have some browning leaves, and that happened to a lot of my plants as I came into winter time. It's very common for the old leaves to die off. So that's what you're seeing here with this pothos, and normally I just trim those off. Now if the plant is wilted like that and the soil is wet, then definitely don't water it, because that could be an indication of overwatering. But if the soil's dry and your plant is looking kind of sad and wilty, then there you go, it probably needs to be watered. Another really easy thing to do is if your plant is in a plastic planter or something that's lightweight, is just to like feel it. Is it super lightweight? Is my plant looking thirsty? Is the soil dry? Then obviously it's time to water it. Now that's a little bit harder to do if you have a heavy ceramic planter or a terracotta pot, in which cases I would recommend using a moisture meter. I have a lot of plants that I still use a moisture meter for, especially my larger pots. If it's a plant that has a lot of soil, using a moisture meter is key, because you may feel in the top layer of soil and it feels pretty dried out, but you'd be surprised that it can be pretty saturated still down at the bottom. And the last thing you want to do when that happens is to give it more water. So how dry do you want the soil to get? With pothos and with a lot of plants that are epiphytic and climb up the sides of trees or are aroids, they like to be dried out in between. their waterings. Now, you don't want it to be bone dry for an extended period of time or anything like that, but you know, if the pot is light, the soil feels dry to the touch, if it's a deep pot and you're not sure about the bottom, or a heavy ceramic planter and you've done your moisture meter, it shows it's pretty dry. If your plant is looking a little thirsty and dehydrated, that is the perfect time to water. So next up, what type of water do you use? There are different options, some being rainwater, which is a fantastic one, distilled water, purified filtered water, tap water. Now, depending on the type of plant you have will determine what type of water they prefer. Now, most plants prefer a pH between 6.5 to 7.5, and I think most of our tap waters, depending on where you live though, are around that, and plants can tolerate that. The problem with tap water is that it has other minerals in it and other kind of chemicals like chlorine that some plants cannot tolerate. So I do use distilled water quite a bit with some fertilizer in there, but a lot of houseplants are pretty tolerant of tap water. What I would recommend doing is, if you're not sure and you're seeing some yellowing leaves and you're suspicious it might be your tap water and the chlorine in your tap water, is to go ahead and put your tap water in your watering can and let it sit out for an hour or a little bit longer, and it will actually allow that chlorine to evaporate, and at that point water your plants with that kind of evaporated tap water. They're very adaptable in their natural habitat, which means they're pretty adaptable in our homes as well, and it's one of the things that makes them such a fantastic house plant. The last thing I would mention with water that is very important for all tropical houseplants is to make sure that the water isn't too cold. If it's too cold, it's going to shock and traumatize those roots. Most tropical houseplants prefer room temperature water. So don't underestimate how important soil is with these plants. Here I have a Cebu Blue Pothos, another cool epipremnum to point out. Look at the color of those leaves, so beautiful. Anyways, just like with the Marble Queen Pothos I have here, you know, these plants and most tropical plants are aeroids, so you'll see them when they're in nature climbing up trees, and they have a lot of airflow happening around their roots. And the best way to have success with houseplants is to try to mimic their natural habitat as much as possible. So with these plants, you want the soil to have airflow just like they do in their natural habitat, and the way to have that and accomplish that is to have a mixture of maybe some orchid bark in the soil, some nice perlite, some pumice. The last thing you want is for these roots to be sitting in a very saturated, wet soil. If you have a pot where your plant has a lot more soil in the planter than roots, then you may want to consider repotting and downsizing to a smaller pot, because when you're watering your plant, the soil is going to retain a lot of that moisture in the soil, and there aren't enough roots to suck up all the moisture in the soil, and that plant is going to have a lot higher risk of becoming overwatered. If that's a concern and you're thinking of your plant and you're like, yeah, mine's like that, it's definitely worth maybe repotting, and just make sure you have some, you know, chunky bits in there so that there's good airflow in those roots. Next up is watering our plant. What is the correct way to water our plant? And the answer is there is no right or wrong way. It's whatever works best for you, whatever works best in your routine and your schedule. For me, I like simple and easy, and I have a lot of plants, so I use a combination of top watering and bottom watering, so I'm going to be going over both of those. Top watering is exactly what it sounds like, watering your plants from the top. The biggest advantage is how simple and convenient this method is. However, if you prefer to top water your plants, there are some things to keep in mind. Your planter must have drainage holes so the excess water can escape. Top watering can displace soil from around the top of the plants and roots, so using a slower stream watering can and not watering in the same spot each time can prevent displacing the soil. Top watering isn't the best way for the soil to become evenly moist, and that can mean that you have to do more frequent watering. Also, the water doesn't evenly saturate throughout all the soil, so some roots may not receive water. However, if you have a plant with a lot of extra soil in the pot compared to how many roots it has, it may be a good idea to top water instead of bottom watering, because bottom watering would saturate all that extra soil and not allow airflow to the roots. It's also important to mention that top watering means the topmost layer of soil will be wet consistently, and this promotes fungus and fungus gnats. If you are treating for fungus gnats with, say, like a mosquito bits tea, at that point it is really good to do that with top watering during treatment, so you target the top layer of soil. If you've been top watering for a long time on a plant, the soil can become compacted and hydrophobic, meaning the soil won't retain water and it just runs through the same path each time you top water. Now, if this happens, it's recommended to bottom water, or you can use something to, like a fork or a pick of some sort, to gently churn the soil and create a more ideal soil to retain the water again. Now, bottom watering is basically pouring water into some sort of container and placing a plant in the water for a period of time, allowing it to soak up the moisture needed from the bottom. Bottom watering allows the plant to soak up as much water as it needs, and it evenly distributes that water throughout the soil. There are a lot of different ways you can bottom water, whether it's with a bowl, a sink, a tub, a cache pot, or a saucer. But this method really helps the roots to grow faster because the water is reaching all of the roots evenly. Now, if you bottom water, make sure your plant is never left sitting in water because that would cause root rot. Now, if you have a plant that has a lot of roots and needs watering very regularly, bottom watering would be a preferred method, as you would not need to water as frequently, and this is due to the soil evenly soaking up as much water as it needs. Also, to keep in mind, if you are placing more than one plant into a container, or you are reusing water as you're bottom watering your plants, make sure that the plants don't have any pests. This way you'll prevent spreading of those pests. This is why I typically have each of my plants in their own cache pot or saucer, and I bottom water that way, and it just helps prevent any kind of pests from spreading. Now, if you are regularly bottom watering, it is recommended to top water at least once every few months, and this will flush out any minerals and salt that may have built up in the soil from bottom watering and those minerals not having the option to flush out. So there you have it. Those are some simple tips and techniques to set you up for success when it comes to watering your houseplants, specifically your beautiful pothos, which we all love so much. Please leave in the comments if you have any suggestions and tips that you have found helpful on your plant journey, and consider subscribing if you'd like to see future care videos and shopping videos show up in your newsfeed, always plant related, of course. We also have a fantastic plant community on Instagram that we would love for you to be part of, and huge thank you again to rePotme.com. They are a fantastic resource for the plant community.
I've included their website in my description below so you can take a look at their quality plant care products.
All right, I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. You'll definitely be seeing me soon. Bye.